All right. Hey, guys, for those of you on Facebook, you'll kind of hear this intro again because I hadn't hit live on one of the channels. So um, we have a lot to talk about tonight. And in a little bit, I'm going to bring on Dave McGrath. Tomorrow is going to be a huge day in the Karen Reed case and on this channel because Sean McDonough will be coming on with a wealth of breaking news on this case. We're going to talk about that tonight. Sean's told me a lot of what he's learned. It's powerful. It's controversial. Look, it takes people of courage like Sean and others in law enforcement to come forward. I think that most cops are heroes at many points in their careers, but the biggest heroes, to me, are the ones who stand up for the truth, even when it's not a good career move or when it pisses off their brothers. Those kinds of cops do exist in this state, and they're starting to come forward. Dave McGrath is going to be at the courthouse for us tomorrow, filming in the crowd, and we're going to stream it here. We'll also stream the hearing itself. So you can just come here to this channel and you'll see everything, and you can comment and chat. And I promise I'll be quiet except during the breaks in the action. So tonight is going to be mostly about the Karen Reed case, but we've been doing a countdown this week, going on live every night until August 1st. On that day, we'll begin shooting our documentary series, Outer Demons. Hold on one second. Guess that was just it was just a repeat. So anyways, on August 1st, we're going to start shooting our series, the documentary series we're producing, Outer Demons. I've been asking myself all day to dig deeper into what that series is really all about. What's at the heart of it? Of course, the central question is whether certain child predators were working together in the 70s. This is the premise of the work of Dave McGrath, the author of Monster, who we've talked about here on the channel, and of Melanie Perkins in her Emmy-winning documentary, Have You Seen Andy? And they're the main subjects of the series we're going to film. They contend these predators were being exploited by the mafia in order to create CSAM, or child sexual abuse material. The series, for me, is a quest for the truth on this subject. But is that what it's all about? Is that the real emotional center of it? How relevant is that for today's crimes? For me, at its heart, the series is this. There are monsters out there, and there are people that, because of their belief system, don't believe in monsters. Just products of their environment, they say. They can be fixed or cured or straightened out enough to become normal members of society. Oh, getting another message from Facebook, so hopefully it's live. I don't know. Well, at least the people on YouTube are able to see it. All right. So I'm not going to dance around it. Technology. So these guys think that monsters can be fixed and become normal members of society. I'm not going to dance around it. This thinking gets people killed. And most heartbreaking because they can't protect themselves, it gets kids killed. Monsters are real. They are born. I'm not talking about criminals. I'm talking about people who come into the world with a brain that predisposes them to enjoy harming others. This is science. Their brains can be identified on MRI scans. There's no cure. We'll have longer discussions about this on other episodes, and I've covered it at length before. But if you ask me what I feel in my heart when I think about this series, it's this. There are monsters, and there are people in powerful positions in academia, in government, in justice that don't believe in monsters. When it comes down to it, the truest reason they don't believe in them is because they really don't want to. This series is just one tiny battle in the war to make people in power believe in monsters. Because right now, as you hear my voice, somewhere a kid is in jeopardy because they don't believe in monsters. Now, the Karen Reed case. What I'm going to say now is going to be hard, but it comes from my heart, and I have to say it. So I hope you can respect that, and I hope you just give me a chance. And it's this: be cautious when it comes to rushing to judgment. Be cautious on anything where the events that happened are not clear. That's not both sidesism. I'm not on both sides of the debate about whether we went to the moon. We went to the moon. I'm not on both sides of the O.J. Simpson thing. Dude killed his wife. But on a lot of things, it's not so clear. To me. In high-profile cases, there's often a rush to judgment. We all know this, yet we still get swept up in this kind of thing. But we know it. Remember Michael Brown and the hands up, don't shoot? Badass cop who shot a poor city kid that was trying to surrender with his hands up. Witnesses even backed up that version of events. The media pounced. The Obama administration pounced, sending Attorney General Eric Holder down to Ferguson, Missouri. Those rednecks couldn't give justice to this kid, right? Only that narrative turned out to be completely wrong. And it was Eric Holder and the feds who proved it, much to their own disappointment, of course. Michael Brown did not have his hands up, nor did he try to surrender. Instead, he was bull rushing the cop who shot him to save his own life. In Minnesota, a couple of years ago, the George Floyd riots, a kid named Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed 3 rioters. We were told that he chased down and shot the first victim in cold blood. But news video from a helicopter showed the opposite, so he was predictably acquitted. Sometimes we know what happened in a criminal event, but often we don't have a clear picture. That's why we have trials. Both sidesism is when we take both sides even though we're pretty sure of one side. That is not what I've been doing on the Karen Read case. I am honestly just not sure what happened. I'm 57 years old. I've seen a lot of things in my time. I've learned that often something seems very clear, but it turns out we got it wrong. And I've observed some other things. Once people buy into a narrative, that's it. They're sold. Once someone bought into the hands up, don't shoot narrative, that was it. Game over for them. No evidence could ever break through the wall they put up. The attorney general was black, liberal, and determined to prove that the cop was a racist killer. But the evidence that he found showed otherwise, and the AG went with the evidence. It turned out the witnesses who first described the hands up, don't shoot scenario were biased, and their testimony became suspect. Numerous other witnesses saw something else. But most important was the physical evidence. The autopsy proved that Brown was bull rushing the cop with his head down. Yet to this day, millions of people won't believe Attorney General Eric Holder's report. They bought into the juicy narrative of the redneck cop executing a poor black kid. And that narrative was just too good for them to ever let it go. In the Karen Read case, we have no clear understanding of what happened. The prosecution doesn't. The defense doesn't. Turtle Boy doesn't. You don't. And I definitely don't. We have a whole bunch of confusing evidence that doesn't really add up. We have no reason to trust police accounts because the investigation was at best incredibly shoddy. We have no reason to trust the prosecution, whose behavior seems to me unethical and irregular. The physical evidence seems to defy odds. The victim's wounds, to our eyes, don't resemble at all what we'd expect from a hit and run. How does he end up 12 feet onto the lawn? Why did no guests see him on that lawn when they leave? I can go on, of course, and I've covered it all at length. Why don't the Alberts come out of the house? Why don't the cops investigate inside the house? And of course, there's the electronic data. Does John's health app data indicate he was inside the home? Did McCabe search how long to die in the cold at 2:27 when she couldn't have known that he was missing? Did she delete calls? People get mad at me, comment as though I'm unaware and unbothered by these things. I am, and I've covered it extensively. In fact, for that reason, it would personally benefit me and my channel if there proves to be a conspiracy. I can say I was in on it early. I was the one who started the Justice for Karen Read group on Reddit. I've gained subscribers, made friends. It's in my interest to keep shouting from the rooftops that Read is innocent. It's in my personal interest that this turns out to be the great conspiracy of our lives. Shit, if I just did that, I could throw on a yellow shirt, show up at a rally, and be popular. I mean, I want to be popular too, right? I want to sit with the cool kids. Who wants to be at the table by himself? Who wants to be the guy that people are saying is faking that he has cancer? I don't take both sides of this debate just as an intellectual exercise. I feel that something might be off here. Maybe the problem is me. Maybe I'm too aware that it's in my interest to rush to judgment, to exploit it. The crowd is grabbing pitchforks and lighting torches. It's going to be one hell of a party, and I'm invited. Heck, I might even get a good seat at the execution. If Reed turns out to be innocent and this is the conspiracy of the century, at the big shindig at the end when all the pats on the backs are going around, I want to be there, right? Maybe someone will even raise a toast. Here's to Yellow Cottage. He was with us from the beginning. Hip, hip, hooray. So maybe the problem is that I don't trust my own desire to be a part of that. I look in the mirror and I say, am I exploiting this? When the crowd calls on me to pick up a stone, will I? Is that what I am? If you were watching this case from a distance, say Springfield, looking at the contours of the case, you'd see that Karen drove away from where her boyfriend was eventually found dead in the snow right around the time he seems to have stopped moving, at least based on his phone. Reed's car had a broken taillight, and the taillight glass from that car was eventually found at the location of the body. There were 3 options on that glass. Either Reed's SUV did have a collision at the scene and deposited glass there, or the police planted evidence, or someone planted evidence right under the nose of the police. A person watching from Springfield would calculate odds. How many times do police plant evidence in murder cases? It happens, but how frequently, especially in a day when cameras are everywhere? How many cases are there where someone plants evidence right under police noses? Now, next to that, how many hit and runs are there? So the outsider is going to calculate based on that simple evidence that it's very likely that this was a hit and run. To overcome that, you need some very powerful evidence. Well, the 2:27 a.m. search for how long to die in the cold would be such evidence. It's far from the only evidence in favor of conspiracy, but that alone would be a slam dunk. So would cell data that showed O'Keefe went inside the house, since everyone there denied he did. I'm not a forensic data expert. One of the partners of this channel, Dave, who's coming on, told us yesterday that he trained in data forensics. But of course, Dave has not had access to the data. No one in the public has. We have to rely on the testimony of competing experts, one side helping the defense, the other helping the prosecution. No independent experts have had access to the data. None of them have chimed in. Look, I know nothing about fires either. If one expert says a fire was an arson and another says it was an accident, how can I tell the difference? There's only one way. Wait for the trial. In the Reed case, the autopsy photos look to me like he'd been in a brawl. The eyes, his hand, but the medical examiner says he wasn't. For now, I can't make a definitive conclusion myself until I hear experts debate it, which probably won't happen until the trial. I can't personally imagine Karen's SUV causing the wound on the back of John's head and leaving no bruises anywhere else in his body. I can't imagine a scenario where Brian Albert doesn't come outside his house that morning if he's innocent. I can't. But I also have a hard time seeing the drunken people inside that house coming up with a scheme like that on the fly. Within minutes of killing John, they were tossing his phone out into the snow, coordinating calls to his phone, using McCabe's phone, getting all the guests in line, sending Higgins off to work at the Canton Police Department. They were getting the Canton Police, the state police, and the medical examiner's office in line. All this after a long day of drinking hard. In the most recent theory floated by the defense, they kept John in the house for hours. Wasn't quite dead, unconscious, perhaps doomed to die, but not dead. So off-duty cops and their family kept a dying Boston cop in the house for hours? Some version of that might be what happened. Probably is. But I'm not going to buy into it lock, stock, and barrel just yet. I'm going to be cautious. I'm going to keep examining evidence and testimony as it comes in. Not so much because I'm afraid to be wrong, as I'm afraid of being right for the wrong reasons. Okay, let me get to letting Dave in. Thank you for letting me get through that. I don't usually do it that way. Dave, you in? Do I have to? Oh, I have to. Let's see, Mike.
No, I had myself muted. I apologize for that. How are you, Kev?
Okay.
Good evening.
Hey, good,
buddy.
man. Good to see you. I look forward to the day when your laptop is back, but
Yes, yeah, I know.
we'll make do with the phone. So sorry about my long monologue there
Great.
and the technical difficulties in the middle of it, but
Of course.
that's life. So how you doing? What'd you do today? Anything interesting?
Here we are. It's 8:17 at night. Actually, no. Today was a slow day. No work.
Yeah.
Hung around with the kids all day. From the time they woke up until right now. When we're done here, I'll probably put them to bed and then see if I can grab an hour to myself. And such is dad life, Kev.
Yeah, yeah. So you've been invited, I guess, once again out to making a library appearance in Jamestown, New York. Why don't you tell people about that a little bit? A lot of the people in the channel probably know you are, but maybe there's some new people too. So anything you want to talk about, go ahead.
Yeah, I wrote a
Related
book. Wrote a book. I'm an investigator, an author, journalist. Cover a lot of political stuff, military life. My true passion is true crime, specifically New England true crime. I wrote a book called Monster: Life and Crime of Wayne Chapman, Life and Crimes of Wayne Chapman, about a serial pedophile operated in the 1970s in New England, who was a great suspect, the leading suspect, the only real suspect in the disappearance of two boys in Massachusetts, one Andy Puglisi, one David Lewison, a few years apart in Brockton and Lawrence, respectively. And book came out last year after about 6 years of investigation into his activities and men of his ilk. And it's been sort of a whirlwind since then. You know, I've been everywhere talking about the book. I've done a lot of talks in Chapman's hometown of Jamestown, New York, a few in Providence, a couple out here in South Coast of Mass. And I'm doing another one here in another month or so with you live. So whoever read the book also listens to this show and obviously saw some value in getting us back out there again. So it should be interesting to do a live show in the hometown of one of the most prolific serial predators of all time, and an alleged child murderer. So interesting times for sure. You just never know what's going to hit with the people, and for whatever reason, this book, this story, I'm always not shocked, but I'm always pleasantly surprised just how enduring it is and how interesting it is to people. So
I guess my job there will be to juggle on the side or something, or maybe if they have a bar, I can make drinks for people.
I don't know, but that's true. That'd be great. I always need a fresh supply of White Claws. No, I'm kidding. I'm mostly sober for the past 10 years, but sometimes anytime I get to talking about Chapman and I'm in a good audience, I've been known to have a beer or two. So as usual, I think your best used is just keeping me on track, keeping the train on track, just enough for me to actually get through it and tell it coherently. So
some guy from commented, a friend of ours, Mike, yesterday, that like, hey, this guy David would have been awesome with us back in the bar days when we were at the bar. I used to own a bar, and I was like, yeah, he could have kept us in line. But now you're saying I got to keep you in line.
Well, I mean, sometimes, especially with this story, and many people have commented this over the years to me, is that there's so many layers and there's so many people involved and there's so many different little sidebar stories that I just feel like sometimes I get a little incoherent when I tell it, and I'll look back and I'll go, I really wish I had somebody to keep me on the tracks. And before me and you met, I was definitely searching for somebody who I could partner with, who could just help me keep me in the right space, so I could do it well. And that's what you do for me, Kevin. My God, I mean,
yeah, I'm definitely like evolving into that role. I saw it not just obviously with you, because when I've talked to you, even just on the phone, you have such a wealth of information about this case that sometimes I'll ask you a question and you start out answering, but then you go down some path that, like, all right, let's say that chapter 13, and it was the same thing with Sean McDonough, who's coming on tomorrow. I have it scheduled for 8. I'm going to change it to 7:30 though, because when I talked to him today, I don't even know if an hour and a half is enough for him to talk about the new material that he's got. I'm not going to really give it away right now, because I don't even know. I really just want Sean to give it away, because some of the things he's got names he's got the receipts, as I say, you know. So, but I don't want the responsibility for that. So if he wants to come on and talk about, but he's got a lot of new information that and he's getting it by the minute, because what's happened is since he did my show Saturday, it's got a couple of thousand views. And obviously, I think it started when he did Turtle Boy, much bigger show a few weeks ago. But he said right now everything is just flying. Everybody's contacting him, and he's just it's become a full-time job taking in information on this case, you know. And they know he's former law enforcement, so he's going to handle it fairly and not, you know. So he's talking to a lot of cops and a lot of people behind the scenes. So but same thing with him. He's bursting with information.
As I said to you about a month ago, I said there's a lot of people in police circles who have a lot of back channel stories about what's going on in this case. And we've talked about a lot of things off the record that we don't want to be the ones to say, right? You don't want to be the guy to say it, because God forbid if you're wrong, or if it turns out that you in any way, shape, or form hurt a case that's ongoing right now, where a girl's life literally hangs in the balance.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see if Sean confirms a lot of things that we've been hearing, which I think he will. And man, the plot continues to thicken, as they say.
When he talks about it tomorrow, what he gave me was a whole new rationale for motive, not just for the motive of who he's thinking is responsible for the murder, but for the cover-up. Because that was the thing that I've always had a hard time really understanding in this case is, you know, they keep talking about compromising Michael Proctor and this and that. And I just see these like 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon kind of connections. I don't really see him being close. There's not even any pictures of him with Brian Albert, or communicating with him or anything. But Sean has some really interesting stuff now that not so much on Michael Proctor, but just in general explains why people would want to help that family. And it's compelling and it's believable. So I can't say that it's true. So I'm going to let him say it, but it puts it together in a way for me that for the first time when it comes to that aspect of the story, it in theory, it makes sense anyways, you know.
It does. And it's what I've suspected all along. And I'm not saying I'm any great. I know a little bit about how the system works. 2 years now, about 2 years on the job. And I know the dynamics of family, as everyone here can understand. I made a comment yesterday that they'd love for this to go away, and that's ultimately what they'll absolutely try and do. I think. Although hearing what I heard today and knowing what I know now, or what I think I know now, you know, I'm kind of starting to come around to the fact that somebody might actually get prosecuted on this who's not named Karen Reed, which is great. That's what we all want. And
someone has to be, if she is innocent. I mean, it's a real tragedy if they don't get the culprits and they don't get who's behind the conspiracy, if there is a conspiracy, you know. I mean, that's why it's not. This is like when I was looking over a lot of cases today and trying to find some different ones where there might be a rush to judgment, and then later on, you know, you find guys that they go to jail, they're on death row, but then the DNA clears them. There was a lot of that stuff on there. This is not just about Karen Reed. She's the only one on trial, but realistically, there's a lot of other people on trial here, because there's a lot of people. If it breaks away from her, there's a lot of people that are going to jail, and some of them for murder. So I think there's a lot to kind of weigh in there as far when you're trying to think who's being persecuted. So.
Right. And I see a comment from BL. BL, if you're interested in my digital knowledge, feel free to shoot me an email. When I got out of the Army, I went immediately to school because the GI Bill is a thing, and I wanted to reap every dollar of that. And at the time, bunch of years back, I thought I was going to go work for the FBI. And the best degree was either accounting or digital forensics. So I took digital forensics, studied it for a couple of years, really became engrossed in it. And I don't practice. I don't do any work in the field at all, but I have a vast understanding of it. So leave me your email, man. I'll shoot you an email and I'll give you I'll answer whatever questions you have. Sorry, Kev, just want to answer the commenter.
No, that's great. We have no formal structure here today. So actually, since you brought it up, why don't you tell us why you went into the Army?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I mean, listen, everybody has their hero things that they tell themselves, like, hey, I'm going to go and fucking do this, and I'm going to end the war myself and single-handedly kill bin Laden and mail his head back to New York so they can put it on display, with my name next to it. I apologize. Just dropped the bottle. Just water, guys.
That's Dave's son, Connor. He's always hanging around.
Yeah, he does not leave my side. So, I mean, yeah, it was really like most people, man. 9/12 was the most incredible time in the history of our country. I mean, everybody was united. Didn't matter that George Bush was in office and he was a hardcore Republican with many conservative views. And the left hated him. There was no more left, right. It was just American. And my dad brought me to the recruiting office the very next day after 9/11. I was standing next to a guy who was 40 years old. He was my age now, and this was 20 years ago. And he was a guy who was a computer programmer, and he was talking all this shit to me about how much money he made. And finally, even my 18-year-old self, being a smart ass, I said to him, that can't be true. I mean, what the fuck are you doing here? Why are you trying to join the military, And he literally, I remember seeing him about a week later when we went for our entrance exam and our physical. And he said, hey, kid. I was like, hey, man, his name was Jeff. I was like, what's up, Jeff? And he handed me a bunch of his pay stubs, and he explained to me how I made $7,000 on this deal. And he, instead of bragging, he really kind of took the time to show me, like, hey, this is how I made all this money, and you can do other things outside the service when you're done, and blah, blah, blah. And the guy was certifiably, making $200,000-300,000 a year, quit his job, big firm, to join the military after 9/11. And he actually ended up getting killed in Afghanistan years later. So, it was just that. I don't have any, like, I'm not like one of those people who's like super impressed by myself. Like, I've done a little more than some and a fuckload less than most, So I feel like that's a different part of my life now. Things have, I got out a while back, and like, it's just another part of my life. It's like everybody's life is like a play. You know what I mean? That was like act one, and like now the curtain's kind of closed, and like it's kind of hard to go back to that. It's kind of hard for me to look back on it, especially now with the way we got out of Afghanistan, the cowardly way we got out, and we lost 13 American service members, all young kids below the age of 30, some below the age of 20.
Dave, we lost your mic. I don't know if you can hear me. We lost your mic. You still there, Dave? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. So we lost your mic. Okay. So we'll wait for Dave to get back. So Dave is from, a lot of you guys here already know, but Dave will be with us on August 1st, and he's him and Melanie are the main subjects of our documentary. We're pretty excited. Let's see, he's about back in. All right, he's back. All right.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Let me just finish my thought with these guys. So we're filming on August 1st in Lawrence, and then at Bridgewater State, where there'll be some very personal stories told by Dave and Melanie at both locations. These are central. Well, Lawrence was a central part of one of the Andy Puglisi case, was where he went missing, which is a very important case that is kind of the connective tissue between the cases of missing children in the 70s that Dave and Melanie both think are connected. So we think it's going to be an important documentary series, and that's just the start of where we're going to go. It's a continuing investigation. What I thought Dave might go into a little bit more is, but every time he goes out to Jamestown, and I think it's like a 9-hour trip out there for him, he investigates something new out there too. And he's still taking. So Wayne Chapman died a couple of years ago, and these crimes was in jail starting in late 1976. But people out there are still witnesses coming forward. So there's still things to investigate, even for these cases going back to the 70s. And as we go forward, we'll be getting to cases that connect more into the present. But the reason we think that there's kind of another reason that makes this relevant for the present is the idea that back then, their thesis is that these guys are being exploited by the mafia in order to make CSAM, child porn, basically. And so when you look at something like that, it's not hard to imagine that it's still, we know child porn is still going on now. Is it still the same way where people are connected? And I've talked about with Dave, one theory is that people are maybe doing it. Maybe people are passing along material now and using kind of the same methods that they did in the 70s because now they're afraid to do things on the internet. So there may be something, they may be using some of the same practices that were being done back then. So I don't know what you think about that, Dave. Is that a crazy theory?
What do you mean that? What's the theory? I'm sorry. I think you cut out on me a little bit. Surmise that theory for me one more time.
Well, I'm trying to connect the cases of the 70s and make them more relevant to what we're doing today. I mean, to cases going on today. And so today is obviously, back then you didn't even have, in 1976 the VCR hadn't even invented yet. So people that were passing on movies, it was reels, right? And so we live in a very different time now, and so everything is internet. But I think because the feds have gotten very good at catching these guys, and you really can't have any secrets on the internet. I suspect that these guys are avoiding the internet, and they're doing everything kind of using the same personal one-on-one type of communication that they would have had to do back in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, we do know that it still happens to this day, right? Operation Playpen just happened a few years back. Hundreds of men across the country went to jail. The main creator behind the site was a man named Richard W. Chase, who lived in Naples, Florida. I actually spoke to his wife 6 or 7 months ago for something else that I was working on. So we know it happened. In fact, I would implore anybody reading this or watching this to just look at the DOJ website and type in search for anything to do with children, child sexual exploitation, child rape, production, distribution of child pornography, and look at how many people every day go away for life and they're almost always congregating on the internet. So is there guys in dark corners of this country right now driving up and down the roads together like Bart Jonah and Chapman once did? I don't know. I certainly hope not. That would be an atrocity. A lot of people got hurt over that. But I do know one thing is that these guys always find each other, right? If you have these sort of proclivities, you're going to find somebody who's just like you. You're trying to find your person, your tribe. As I read about in the book a lot, we all congregate together. We anybody who can affirm your view of the world or your behavior in your mind, because even these guys more than anything hate themselves. They're disgusted by themselves. They know that the way they behave and the things that they prefer are not okay with polite society, so they're looking for somewhere safe. And you see this all the time. I see it every day in the jail, and I saw it in prison when I worked in prison. These guys immediately flock to one another. They talk about ways to beat the law the next time. You wouldn't believe the discussions I've heard, and in doing that job and being around them every day is what reaffirmed what I already knew by my research, is that these guys will always come together and trade and commit crimes together. So, and we just saw it on the most massive scale possible with Playpen. That was the biggest child exploitation site in the history of the United States taken down, and hundreds upon hundreds of indictments. Many life sentences handed down, and all guys who were interconnected to each other.
You sent me something really, really interesting a couple of days ago. The kind of a little missing piece of the puzzle for me on the road to trying to convince me about the accomplished theory with these guys. But I just want to pause real quick to just tell everybody that tomorrow there's the pretrial hearing for the Karen Reed case. And we're the channel you want to be on, because we're going to be streaming the actual coverage from the court. So and I won't speak while there's anything going on. Connor won't be there either.
Thank God.
So I'll be quiet and we'll just talk during the break, but you'll be able to watch it and you'll be able to comment here with the rest of us. But in addition to that, An even more special treat. Dave has been tasked by us and the Law Enforcement Today network to cover the trial at the courthouse. So he's going there to cover it, and he'll have his look for him there. So for those of you that might be going there, I know Turtle's having a rally, so keep your eye out for Dave. We're sorry we didn't have a Yellow Cottage Tails shirt to give him, or a hat or anything like that. We scrambled today to try to find something like that, so he could stand up. But you've seen him on the channel, so you'll recognize him. Go over and say hello. And now I wanted to get to, so I've never, when Melanie first had told me over a year ago that she believed that these predators in the 70s were working together as accomplices, Melanie is an extremely intelligent person, but she's obviously like anybody. You've been affected by the case because she's missing her childhood sweetheart, and someone that impacted her very closely. So at the time, I took it like, well, as smart as she is, maybe this is just what she needs to believe or wants to believe, and I kind of left it there. But then I looked at, I read Dave's book after he contacted me, and I was like, maybe there's more to this than I realized. And of course, the needle keeps moving a little bit more when I talk to Dave. But I still keep that skeptical side, as I do in anything. Well, he sent me. Do you remember what you sent me this week? You sent me
was that the excerpts of an excerpts of 3 or 4 years ago. I got a bunch of copies of letters from correspondence between Bar Jonah and Wayne Chapman. It's really hard if you're coming in the middle here to know who these people are, but
yeah, just give him a very quickie on who those guys are.
I'll give you the quickest Reader's Digest version I can give you. Nathaniel Bar Jonah, predator, born in Worcester, Massachusetts, raised most of his life in Webster. Immediately 7 years old, he's committing crimes against children. He's tried to murder a classmate of his, a female, when he was 8 years old. Eventually goes on to bigger crimes right after he graduated from high school. He beat an 8-year-old girl so bad that when I talked to her some 4 or 5 decades later about the case, she was still shaking when I talked to her. Literally, the minute I brought up his name, she started to shake uncontrollably. He kidnapped 2 boys in Shrewsbury, put them in the trunk of a car, ended up going to Bridgewater over that and doing some prison time, gets out. Immediately finds another boy in Oxford when he's out for a walk in a rainstorm, tries to asphyxiate that boy, tries to kill him in the back of his mother's car while his mom's in the post office. Eventually, the common theory, or the common thing you hear in the media, is that he was thrown out of Massachusetts. He absolutely was not. He moved to Montana without ever checking in with probation, without ever doing his court-ordered psych evals. He basically just disappeared off the map here in Mass, and nobody ever followed up. And he ended up in Montana, and a little boy went missing very close to where he lived, and that little boy was never found. He was allegedly cannibalized. Chapman was Bar Jonah was the best suspect in that case. Many still believe, including myself, that he got away with murder there. He ended up dying in prison. And he ended up dying in prison on the molestation of 2 other boys in Montana, unrelated to the boy who went missing. So criminal offender, serial offender, never stopped offending against boys, absolute evil, psychopath, pedophile. Wayne Chapman, very similar, born and raised upstate New York, commits crimes against children his whole childhood, into his teenage years, into his late teens, does a little bit of prison time, ends up randomly in Providence, Rhode Island, in his early 20s. Somewhere around summer of '74, ends up in in Providence, right where I sit, only about a mile and a half from my house right now. How did he end up in Providence is a whole nother discussion. And if you read my book, I think I do a pretty good job of theorizing how, because this area here in Providence was the hub of child pornography at the time. The patriarchs, the mob family that ran New England for decades, generations, were huge import-exporters of child pornography. It wasn't drugs that kept the business going. It wasn't shakedowns. It was porn, and specifically child pornography. And Wayne Chapman was a major curator and producer of child pornography. And he allegedly murdered a boy in Brockton that he admitted to murdering in 1974, a 5-year-old boy named David Lewison. Another boy he admitted to killing and recanted was Angelo Puglisi in the summer of '76. '67 in Virginia, he lights a boy on fire, ties him to a tree, allegedly. 1975, he rapes 2 boys behind the Higgins Memorial Pool in Lawrence. And what we didn't realize at the time, and what I've uncovered through my research, is that Barjona and Chapman knew each other. They knew each other really well outside the walls of prison. They had spent some time in prison together at Bridgewater Treatment Center and MCI Cedar Junction, Walpole here. And how I came to know that was I was tipped off by a former FBI agent who had worked the case in Montana involving Barjona. It became so obsessed with Barjona, they actually had to leave the bureau. And he gave me some hand correspondence, thick packet of correspondence. A lot of it was Barjona's writings. He liked to do ciphers. He was just a total psychopath who babbled on through writing in these spiral notebooks. In fact, I've got one of them right here.
Read that one letter or that line from it that you sent me during the week, because we already knew, or many of us that studied this case knew that they knew each other, but that line was really different because that was a real different revelation. So if do you have that handy?
Yes, I do. Snatch, I just want to answer you. I see the comment. They said Chapman had over 100 victims. I believe it's well more than that. If he was living and breathing and had access to a front door to walk out of it, he was offending against children. I've talked to myself alone 54 victims. 54, and I know that number off the top of my head because I keep detailed notes on all of them for my book and for my later projects on Chapman. But yeah, around 50 that I've talked to. God knows how many more that he'll never admit to. I lost him for 2 years, about 72 to 74. I have no idea about Wayne Chapman's whereabouts. There's some discussion that he was maybe in Florida. And if so, I'm sure he ruined a generation of kids while he was there. You don't understand. This guy was the most fixated, predatory human being that I've ever ran across in 10 years of looking into true crime cases, a couple years working in the sheriff's office, and other jobs. I've never seen anyone quite like this guy when it comes to the amount of kids he offended against. So
I just found it, the one you sent me.
Oh, go ahead, read it. I'm sorry, I was looking for it.
I had to look back to the So this is from Barjona in 1995 to Wayne Chapman. They were both in prison at the time. Dear Wayne, I recall driving all those roads with you all those days and years. And yes, those little redacted loved when we left our mark on them. I will surely slick up my next court appearance, I think in 1995, brings you great I don't know if this is copied exactly, but I will surely slick up for my next court appearance. I think 1995 brings you great grace and freedom. All right, so I recall driving all those roads with you all those days. So that is kind of a smoking gun, because we knew that they knew. We talked about this before, is that we didn't know if they knew each other after in prison, because a lot of these guys met at Bridgewater State Hospital, which is where they would send, in addition to other types of inmates, they home the sexually deviant people in Massachusetts. And this, to me, I called it Monster Academy. That's where you went for your PhD. These guys were all in there meeting each other and sharing notes and sharing techniques. And then some of them, like Barjona, got out and then used what they learned. And all those little, and I don't know what's redacted, loved ones when we left our mark on them. So that says they were not only driving around, they were finding victims.
And not only that, there's a little bit more correspondence that I have that points to directly how they met, which I'll save for another time, because I know that we can just go on forever. But not only is that, a correspondence between the two of them where they talk about driving up and down the road together, and as horrifying as that is, but they both had the same alibi when they were questioned about the Andy Puglisi disappearance. Both of them had they said they weren't together. Nobody put Barjona there. A million people put Chapman there. Everybody who was handed a picture of Wayne Chapman said that guy was there that day. He was there that day. He had a slight limp from polio. He had a scar over his right eye. Barjona, now, for those of you who've never seen a picture of him, never heard his name, this is the first time ever. He was 300 pounds with a scraggly beard. He was a total mess. He's somebody you would have remembered, right? If you saw him, he had 2 different color eyes. He's not a guy that if you were handed a picture of him, would you say, he kind of fits in with the crowd. I'm not too sure. He definitely didn't fit in with the crowd ever.
All these guys were large, both him and Charles Pierce. These guys are all well over 6 feet, big guys, strong dudes. So.
Yeah, especially Pierce, who was a towering guy and thin and actually in shape. Barjona was super heavy, but also a guy who was not afraid to throw around his weight, as I've been told many, many times over the years, looking into him, is that, he threatened people on the regular. He threatened people he worked with. He threatened random civilians on the street. Anybody who crossed him, he had no problem fighting, which is different than Chapman, who would bully kids, no problem, but was very cowardly when it came to adults. But just to finish that thought, what really started putting it together for me too was independently, I read Wayne Chapman and Barjona's statements regarding the disappearance of Andy Puglisi, and they had the word for word the exact same alibi on where they were on the day that Puglisi disappeared. Now, nobody put Nathaniel Barjona there on scene with Chapman. He was alone, allegedly, until much later when he was committing the murder. One eyewitness said another man was there. It just really struck me that when Barjona was questioned by police about it, he gave the exact same alibi. Hey, I was up around that area, but I was pulled off on the side of the road on the rest area. And that's the same exact alibi that Chapman gave in an independent statement, not with Barjona, at the exact same time frame, same day, to Al Mintz in 1976 when questioned about it. And that really struck me, as if they had worked that out ahead of time, even though Barjona was never fingered as being on scene anywhere. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't involved. He could have been in that area.
Yeah, sorry, I was still trying to. I'm having all kinds of problems trying to get this to go live on Facebook. It's showing a live. It is live, but I don't think it's public. Even though I work, I don't know, and I've got this too low frame rate thing that I just cannot fix. I've tried for weeks to try to fix it. So Facebook is just. I hate Facebook. It's too hard to figure things out on there. They make it impossible. Anyways, sorry for that little interlude, guys. But that to me, the thing was that now. You've been convinced of the accomplice thing, and Melanie too. Just when I exchanged messages with her not too long ago, when I said the same thing that you move the needle, but I'm still. She ran a whole bunch of things at me in an email, but it was just like kind of bullet points. I didn't even understand what they all meant. She obviously so. Well, I look forward to hearing what more she has to say to make the case. So she obviously has a lot of other arguments and evidence that wasn't in her documentary. That hopefully she'll take advantage of the opportunity of being with us to make some of that case. But what you have there in that letter is the closest thing to a smoking gun that I've seen. Yeah. I mean, that's an admission. It's not an admission on a specific case, but it's an admission that they spent years cruising around looking for victims, and an admission that they made some of the victims. That's the closest. I mean, that's the smoking gun right there.
That's not the only one. I mean, after this, I can send you many more. I mean, they absolutely discuss knowing each other well before prison on a multitude of occasions via letter. That's right out there in the public sphere. They didn't even bother to hide it.
No, crazy. People are so. Well, people are commenting, seeing how many people are going to the rally tomorrow. Well, we know you'll be there, Dave.
I will be there. I will be live on scene. So anybody who's going. If you want to connect with me ahead of time, feel free. I'd love to get some interviews. I'm going to hope to interview Aiden. I'm going to definitely interview Aiden, but I'm going to try and connect with some local officers who I know in the area. I'm going to connect with any Albert or McCabe that I see. I will question, so should be fun.
Maureen Coakley's boss offered her the day off. Wow. The boss must be a big Turtle Boy fan too then, or just someone who really believes in this case. Let us know which is the case there, Maureen. So, I mean, I don't know how many people are upset with my monologue. I'm still going to stay on the fence a little bit, and I'll always be analyzing the evidence that comes in, because in a case like this, there's just so much that isn't explained. Tomorrow night we'll be coming on with Sean, and he talked to me for about an hour today on the phone this morning with compelling, powerful, controversial new evidence, kind of mind-blowing in a lot of ways. But still, it's not, is it smoking gun? I don't, not yet. I mean, he's got so many people contacting him. I don't know what he's going to have tomorrow. He's going to have more for sure. And he's working on trying to get more information on the call that Kerry Roberts, that Kerry Roberts supposedly made at 5 a.m. to the Canton police. Because to me, I feel that that's an important call, especially if we can find out a transcript for that call and whether or not the Canton police dispatched a car. We talked about that at length the other day, me, Tom, and Dave. And so everybody has slightly different feelings in this. But I think potentially that's something to get your hand on. And also related to that, if I was Karen Reed's defense team, I would be I would send a subpoena to the police dispatcher at Canton. He or she might have something interesting to say, what they might have seen going on behind the scenes there. We know that Brian Higgins, is it Brian? I forget, but Brian Higgins left the party and logged in there at 1:30. So, I mean, I think potentially, that person might play ball, but they're just a dispatcher. You put them under oath. They're not, right. I don't think they're going to lie. So go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm done.
I think everything we, right. I think everything we talk about is moot because it'll just never go to trial. But, in the interest of doing the show and having things to discuss, I'm hoping tomorrow that I can corner a couple people and get some answers. I mean, they don't know who I am. They're not really that recognizable involved in this case anyway. So the main reason why I want to go is because I want to get the vibe. I want to see,
sure.
Who is, yep. It's real. Like I said, when we talk about me, when we talked about me when I did the book, I had to go to all those places. I couldn't just write about them from the periphery. No, I needed to go into their childhood bedrooms. I needed to go to the murder scenes. I needed to walk the same streets that they did. I needed to be around and talk to people who knew them, and the cashiers and the auto mechanics and the Uber drivers and whoever else. So that's what I want to do here is just the story's incredible. I want to talk to the people from Canton who are going to be on ground. I want to talk to Karen Reed's family members. I want to talk to James O'Keefe's ex-girlfriends who I know will be there. And, and I wanted to see if I can stand next to Jen McCabe, who I'm sure is going to be there, and say, hey, how's that grand jury going? And see what happens, So it should be interesting for the channel anyway. And again, everything, when you cover these stories, it's just, I can't do it from the periphery. I've got to be there. I've got to be walking right next to everyone and seeing what happens. The judge is probably going to issue a gag. So I imagine that it's going to be pretty intense. I hear that the other side, I heard from Turtle Boy today that the other side is potentially going to try and agitate. So, again, I would heed his words and be an adult. People might say, I plan on wearing one of my Karen Reed t-shirts, and
you got more than one?
I've got two of them. So, and, because I know how this system works. I'm completely convinced of her innocence, and I don't feel like I'm ever going to have to eat those words. So
I do want to respond to that, and also to some of the comments that were there in the chat right now. So as far as there never being a trial, again, I have to be Scully and you're Mulder. Right now, there is a trial scheduled. So it may turn out that the trial is canceled, or it may turn out that their goal is that they want to go to trial and there'll be reasonable doubt and she'll get off. I don't know, but we can't jump to the conclusion that there will never be a trial. And as far as somebody's asking, will the truth ever come out? Well, if there is a federal grand jury and somebody is running a legitimate federal investigation and they're looking into corruption, and if they're looking into wrongdoing on this case, then I think the truth will come out, because you're talking about this. This is where the number of conspirators works against you for something like that too, because you have people in that house that certainly didn't approve of what happened if someone was killed inside that house, and probably didn't approve of the conspiracy, and don't want to see their lives ruined because of this. So all you have to do is get enough pressure on one of those people, and somebody will crack. But if you don't have a legitimate investigation, it's kind of like, you don't want to go political here, but if it's like what's going on in Washington now. If the FBI doesn't really want to get people to talk, you're not going to get someone to crack. You know,
Right.
if the federal government doesn't want on certain cases things to be uncovered, because if you can't compel someone to testify by threatening to say, hey, if you don't tell us, come on here and tell us the truth, you're going to jail, then most of the time people won't talk in those cases. So I do think the truth, I think it'll come out. The other thing too is larger conspiracies, odds are eventually they come out.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that a lot, and I just, how many of your listeners or your viewers right now are going to know what Operation Paperclip was, or MK
Probably a lot.
Ultra? I'd say maybe less than half, honestly.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
How about
surprised if it's half, though, you know?
how about the Gulf of Tonkin, where the Joint Chiefs of Staff signed off on American warships being blown up so they could blame it on Cuba and start a war with Fidel Castro? It just goes on and on. I mean, in the 1960s.
Well, my understanding of Tonkin was that it was a conspiracy to get us more officially involved in Vietnam.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and President John F. Kennedy, the great playboy, said absolutely not. We won't do that. We will not kill American sailors, so we can get deeper involved in a pointless war. And what they do to him, they shot him in the head, and then they put his puppet in who would go along with anything. Doesn't that sound familiar? So I mean. Go ahead.
Hey, Dave, Scott's got one there that I actually don't know about. Maybe you do. Operation Mockingbird.
What's that? Yeah, it's Operation Mockingbird is in the layest terms, it's CIA sort of. Is that the one, Scott, where more of the media control, where they were putting in, they were trying to put subliminal messaging through the media?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Mockingbird. It doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah,
to me.
I know that one. I know that.
Okay.
One.
Yeah.
I believe it's the one it's where they were controlling the media. And
So
of course they still do that.
Is it something recent, or is this a recent conspiracy?
No.
Or
We're going back to the 60s and 70s,
Okay.
even the 1950s, where, I mean, even in the 1950s, they were taking prisoners in Alcatraz and they were giving them LSD and making
Right.
Violent sociopaths even more violent so they could find a truth serum, right? I mean, even James Bulger, the Boston mob boss, who was a pedophile in his own right and child porn pusher, harkened back all the time to his violent behavior getting even worse after he got out of Alcatraz, because they were handing him hallucinogens every day. And I mean, it just goes on and never ends. And Scott makes a great point. There's a million of these videos on YouTube where you can see the nightly news all across the country. They splice it all together and they all say the same thing. Literally every one of them. It's like a script goes out and they all say the same thing. And how does that have anything to do with Karen Reed or what we're talking about? You know, not a lot, but I think it's interesting that, you know, I just think it's interesting how a narrative gets out there, and at least 50% of the country is just going to, I mean, how many people are we going to encounter tomorrow, for those of us going to court, who are going to blindly say, Karen Reed killed her boyfriend. This is a great family of police officers, and there's no possible way that they would have done anything wrong. And this lady's a bitch and a crazy person, and she killed him, and she's a murderer. And every single shred of evidence, common sense, points in the opposite direction. There's literally not a bit of evidence that points towards Karen Reed. I mean, show me one thing.
I can, and I have.
Are you talking about what, her statements made to the EMT? Are you talking about?
No, okay. I'm going to start from the basic fact, as I said in my intro, and as I mentioned to Turtle Boy, when you start out with the timeline that John O'Keefe was killed or his phone stopped moving at 12:31, and right at that, and Karen Reed got home at 12:41. 10 minutes later. And that's about exactly what that drive would be on a snowy night by someone who wasn't familiar with the area. So the timeline fits perfect. Now, that doesn't mean she did it, but it is awfully suspicious that the timeline fits perfectly.
Kevin, great. The timeline fits perfectly. Congratulations on that. I want to commend you. How in the world, with let's just say you're going to court, which this never will because it'll be a fucking laugher. They will laugh you out of court. How in the world are you going to explain this kid beaten that bad, back of his head, his eyes swollen shut, and the dog bites, and say that this lady with a magic tail light did it? How are you going to get into a court of law in an alleged country that's not a joke, in an alleged non-banana republic, and try and make that case? How?
Okay, here's the thing is, as I said in my opening monologue, okay, I can't explain either side. That's the problem. How are you going to make the case that
I'm easily going to make that case? Easily.
No, it's not so easy as you think. That and that's why even Turtle Boy, who's basically on trying to take the defense's side, the story changes all the time. That's not a knock at Turtle Boy. It's just no one really has a coherent theory that matches all of the facts. John O'Keefe was found in the snow at 6 a.m. His phone stopped moving in that spot at 12:31 a.m. It's very hard to get around some of those things. Of course, it's possible that's why I had to come up early on in this case with the idea that they took the phone and threw it into the yard. But that's a pretty hard sell to think that they actually thought to do that.
So let me ask you something. Gun to your head right now. How does this end? How does it
end?
Yeah, gun to your head right now, $1 million in Keno money.
All right.
How does this end?
If it goes to trial right now, based on
not
the information,
not if. There's a gun to your head. How does it end?
It's going to trial, first of all. Okay.
Wow.
And
that's insane.
It's not insane. She's Dave. All right. She is going tomorrow for a pre-trial hearing. It's scheduled for trial. Okay. So it's insane to say it's not going to trial. All right. Now, maybe it doesn't, but that's very, very unusual. It is scheduled for trial. So you're literally the one that is making a highly questionable statement, and you're presenting it as though it's a fact that you don't even have any doubts about in your mind, which I find that a little worrying, to tell you the truth.
It would just
she's going on trial. All right. And now I believe she probably at this point will get off on reasonable doubt, but it's going to be the jury that gets her off. And so, I mean,
how are they going to explain all this without being, I just don't see how you could. Let's even start from night one. I mean, how do you even put anybody who showed up to that scene and put them on the stand and think for 1 second that that's going to stand up to cross-examination? You let her leave. She's allegedly suicidal. She's got a vehicle that may have been used in a murder. She's at the very least a great witness. She gets to go home. You don't take the witnesses or the alleged perpetrators and split them up. You do none of that. You take a former police chief and put him under oath, and you're going to say he came back a week later and found the taillight. Then you're going to put the state police CERT team, or all they do is find evidence. That's literally a specialized job where you go to school and you put in for it. It's a bid. They didn't see it for a week. How are you going to put them on the stand? I mean, it's going to be a fucking laugher.
They're going to go on the stand, and maybe some of those people might be telling the truth, or maybe some of these things might turn out to have explanations. Like I said in my opening monologue, I'm not sure if you heard it, and I've said it many times before. I can't explain how John O'Keefe who's 6'2", could get a wound on the back of his head that crushed his skull from a taillight, which is 28 inches off the ground, and he has no other injuries on anywhere else in his body. So no, I can't explain it, but you're asking me. I don't know what the entire case is of the prosecution because they haven't had a trial yet. And that's why we have trials. That's when the experts come in to testify. That's when you hear the cases. It's even though Lally has kind of occasionally used these motions to try to leak out some of what he's saying, some of what he's trying to get into the public. But for the most part, it's the defense because their job is to create reasonable doubt, and they're not paid public employees. So they're the ones that are kind of using the media to try a case. And that's why tomorrow it's going to be up for a gag order. And we'll see what happens. But that's common what happens in these cases, because it's the media is trying, the defense team is trying to use the media and the public to try to create reasonable doubt, and they're not supposed to do that.
Don't you feel like they have to, though, and going
Yes,
up
they do.
against this machine?
Sure, it's a smart strategy, but when you ask me what the prosecution's case is on every one of these things, that's what the trial is for. You'll see these things possibly explained in the trial. I can't imagine what the explanation is, but I've seen in other trials that come up where I don't know what the explanation is, and then all of a sudden you watch the court and you're like, oh, yeah, all right, now it makes sense now. I've been at trials, and it's just, so I mean, it's again, I'm not taking the side that Karen Reed is guilty. I'm not, I'm more like 80% that she's innocent.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of standing back, just saying, well, the evidence isn't all in. We haven't really heard that much from the prosecution side. We don't know how these things are all going to tie together. So it may be that they have some way of doing it. And some things, at the end of a case, sometimes there are certain things that are just never understood. And history goes down that way. The Lizzie Borden case, it doesn't make sense that she did it, and it doesn't make sense that she didn't do it. So, I mean, but obviously the Bordens are dead, so something happened. So I'm not suggesting that aliens came down. It's just sometimes they don't always get to the bottom of a case. And Lizzie Borden was acquitted. So I think that that probably will happen here. There's reasonable doubt. But I mean, at this point, it seems to me that I understand what you're saying, that the prosecution does not want to have, for instance, the former chief of police testify, that they don't want to have Canton cops testify because it's embarrassing to them, or possibly ruinous to them. So you're saying that they're going to find some way to sandbag this case. But if they are, then why are they applying? They don't seem like they're acting for it. They don't seem like their emotions are heading in the direction they're trying to sandbag the case. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't be having a pretrial hearing and asking for a gag order motion. Why would they be doing that if their secret goal is to not have a trial? I mean, there's going to be a trial.
Okay, well, I guess I'll amend that. Maybe it does go to trial, but I just think that the prosecution is probably secretly, not even secretly, they're going to sandbag this thing, because now they're just in the mode of how many people can we keep from utter incomplete disgrace at this point, right. Not of trying to prove their crazy theories. And I see your comment, Scott. Maybe they should take it out in Norfolk County, maybe bring it to Bristol County up here, or take it out to the middle of Dukes County or something like that, but bring it up to Martha's Vineyard or something. But again, if what comes out about this kid, what I've heard and what you've heard about this kid, I think that changes a lot too. And right. I probably already said too much there, actually. But,
I've been hearing that stuff too, and I'm just reluctant because officially, we all know what he looks like. We've seen the images and stuff. I don't disagree with what Turtle Boy has portrayed, but I don't want to kind of say that stuff myself because I'm reluctant to smear people that aren't charged with anything and aren't supposedly weren't even there. But I also just want to say, Maureen Coakley, yes, I do agree 100% that the prosecution has spewed nonsense. And as I said in my monologue, they've been at best irregular and really unethical. For instance, the surveillance tape. I don't understand how, maybe you don't get, there's all kinds of video sources between Albert's house and downtown and then where O'Keefe lives, and you only get a handful of resources. Is that shoddy police work, or is it something more suspicious? But it's definitely suspicious that there's a gap in the library tape. And now to me, there might have been some explanation, right? When I was watching that hearing, I was waiting to see if Lally would give an explanation. So for instance, maybe just something about the lighting. When you're going in that direction, it doesn't show up. I don't know, anything. He didn't. He just basically said, "Hey, you got the same data as us. What can I tell you?" That was a little disturbing. Yeah, that was disturbing to me. It's like, wait a minute, aren't you bothered, Lally, by the fact that there's a gap in the video?
Right. In a case that you're prosecuting, that you're trying to win. Yeah, I mean, but again, he doesn't have any fear for his job because he's a Massachusetts bureaucrat. And no matter what happens, he'll probably just end up getting promoted anyway. So what does he care?
He makes 100. He makes 106,000. I accidentally stumbled upon that online when I was looking for an image of him. So in Massachusetts, making 106,000, he probably has to buy his shoes at the Salvation Army.
I was going to say that's not a great salary. He's going to get into the private sector. Yeah,
so if he wants to do well, he should become a hero here and then write a book. Stand up for the truth. So I don't know what's going on with that.
And I see
Lunchbox.
Maureen's lunchbox. I see Maureen's comment. Just so you know, Maureen, this is the most. If I can impart any advice to the iPhone users out there, and nothing deletes themselves, and there's not a single thing that's ever gone. From the minute I could take your phone with the right software, and I can find everything you've ever done on that phone from the minute you created your iCloud account. Not when you got your phone, the minute you created your iCloud account. So if you got an iPhone way back in 2007 when they first came out and hit the market and you created your iCloud account, that's how far back I can go. So nothing is ever gone. Ever, 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 ever. Ask Hunter Biden if things are ever gone. That whole laptop story. Yeah, right. Yeah. That whole laptop story about him leaving it in the place in Delaware, that's all bullshit. What happened is in opposition research, they found a guy who could get in and get his account and get his cloud and find all his pictures, text message, videos, emails, everything. It was never left anywhere. It all comes from the cloud. Everything that you do goes into that cloud, and it's never, ever gone, ever.
Yeah. So, actually, I totally forgot about this. You must have seen it, Dave. Maureen just brought it up that Karen was on the Today Show today. Did you catch that?
I did see that. It was like a 3-minute. All I saw was about 3 minutes of it. I could have been longer. I thought she did a great job of making herself sympathetic. And I'm not saying she doesn't deserve sympathy. I think she does. I'm on Team Karen here until I see a lot more. And even if you told me she shot this guy in the head and in full view of everyone, I'd probably still have a hard time believing it, frankly. That said, I did see it. I think she did a good job. The reason why they did all these media hits now is because they're going to be gagged tomorrow. You will not see anything more from them until, the trial begins. So, I was happy to see that. I did see that they're calling it the taillight murders. That's great. A lot of people are going to write books off this. A lot of people are going to get fucking filthy rich off this story. So sorry, go ahead, Kev.
Actually, that would be a great nickname for like a speedy NFL running back. Taillight.
Taillight, yeah.
You're always looking at his taillights. But I did pick up, there were a couple of new bits of information that were new to me anyways from that. I don't know if, did you catch them? So one was that she says she saw John go up to the house and put his head in, was the way she described it.
Yeah.
And then did you have any thoughts on that, or?
Not really. I mean, he poked his head in. I mean, if this comes out with Sean and what we think, what I think, what I've heard happened and what had all been going on between the Alberts and O'Keefe, then I guess it makes sense. He's poking his head to see who's in there, maybe. What I really found the most interesting about that whole clip was the surveillance footage of how they interacted with each other at the Waterfall bar. They were allegedly in a big fight that morning and that afternoon and that evening, and they were swearing off each other and they wanted to break up and they hated each other, and they didn't behave like two people who hated each other at all. I mean, she came right up to him, looked right in his eyes, he hugged her, they hugged, they embraced for a long time. They looked like two people who actually liked each other. It was actually nice to see. It actually hurt me a little bit to know that, in a few hours later, this guy would be dead. And she would be charged with his murder, I think that was the most interesting part of the whole thing was in a private moment, the way they were sort of behaving with each other is not indicative to me of two people who were fighting, frankly.
Right. I wonder if they just got that footage through the recent discovery package they got last week. And is it legal for them to release it? Or
What do you mean?
Make it public? The surveillance video from the bar. Why is that just coming out now? Because they just got the defense just got the final package of all the discovery evidence from the prosecution last week.
Mm-hmm.
Only took them 18 months, right? So 17 months. But
almost like they didn't want it, Kevin. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I mean, they do seem to be hiding stuff. So I mean, just a lot of aspects of this case that you look at. But I thought I don't know why is that coming out now? But the other thing I noticed just back to what Karen Reed. Now it was interesting that her lawyers allowed her to make that specific, because I don't know if she's going to testify at the trial. I would think that she might. I mean, because
she's definitely testifying.
It would be very strange
for
someone to not testify if their cases I just dropped them off. If that's their only, if that's all she if that's her position, I don't know why. What else could they come out and cross-examine? I'm obviously going to try to make it seem like that they were battling and fighting and stuff, which seems ridiculous because she obviously didn't kill him on purpose. That is no purpose in this trial.
Right. Even if she did kill him, I mean, what is the most they could put her up for? I was thinking that the other day. So let's just say she did do it. She backed into him and she didn't see him there. And, I mean, that's at the very least. I'm not even sure with a clean record she'd get jail time for that. To be honest with you, depending on how the blood alcohol comes out. I mean, if she's absolutely hammered and she hits the guy, that's one thing. But if she's stone cold sober and she hits a guy on accident in the middle of a snowstorm or with snowy conditions, I understand the weather wasn't too bad yet. I mean, that's not even manslaughter. You know what I mean? I mean, they could charge you with it, but what is that in the state of Massachusetts with a clean record? You know what I mean? With a clean record, accidental manslaughter. I don't know. So, I mean, the murder too, I believe she's already overcharged like crazy. Even with that theory, she's way overcharged.
Yeah. So the other thing that was new to me, I'm not 100% sure if it's new, but it was interesting to me. So the official story had always been that that they were invited to an after hours party, right? And that Karen just didn't want to go in because she's not a grown ass woman, don't party at that age, she said, or something like that, right?
When you get into your late 30s, it's tough to do that, right? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I still do it, if somebody wants to invite me over to their after hours. So but it was interesting that Jackson has now put out the theory, and he may have suggested this before, but he went out of his way to say there was tension in that house. So they're trying to set up a scenario where maybe, and this actually goes into what Sean is going to talk about tomorrow. I'm not going to tip it off because I don't really know what he's comfortable saying, but he has a reason why there was tension. It's something you haven't heard before, and there's a real reason why there was tension in that house and tension between John and the people in that house. And so I'm curious about that because I got to let Sean go into it. But if what he's saying is true, John was not only walking into a snake pit, but he knew it.
And he knew it. He still did it anyway. And
maybe he thought he was going to settle things or something. But
maybe he thought he was going to settle it, and maybe somebody iggyed him and said, "Hey, man, like we want to chat with you after this. Don't tell your girlfriend to come in. Let's handle this." If things really were as hot as they were for the reasons that we've been told, that haven't come out yet, that will come out soon. Then maybe someone grabbed him and just said, "Hey, man, they want to talk to you," and he was a man about it, and he said, "All right, I'll talk to them. I'm not going to stand out here in 11-degree weather." So, I mean, and I just saw another comment from Scott, and that's right. I mean, he was in a t-shirt and no jacket, and the dude was trying to get in the fucking house.
He was in a long sleeve t-shirt.
Right. It was you're right, and I think it had a hood too. From the surveillance video, it looked like he had a hood. So he had a light hoodie on, which is obviously, those of us New Englanders, we know that's not suffice for 11-degree cold ass winter night.
But I gotta say, we're all a little. I don't know if it's my Irish blood or whatever, but when I used to own the bar, I'd be out there when it was 10 degrees, which was a lot colder than it was there that night. And I wouldn't even put on a jacket. I'd have a short sleeve shirt out, and I'd go out with the cops, and we'd stay out there about a half hour to disperse the crowd. And if it wasn't really windy, 10 degrees doesn't bother me. Snow doesn't bother me.
That's fucking crazy because I hate the cold.
Yeah, it just doesn't. So everybody's different. So if I was in John's shoes, I wouldn't have taken a jacket in either because I'd be afraid I'd forget it, which is usually what happens to me. I go to an after hours, I leave my jacket behind. So because I'm going to be hot in there, and I take it off and then I forget about it. So I would have done the same thing. I'd leave it in the car and walk, and I wouldn't run in. I'd just walk in. But
I don't think he was invited to any after hours party. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean,
well, he was in constant communication with Jen, who she was like kind of giving him directions or talking him into it. So he was definitely invited. Whether it was a party or something else, is that what you mean? Like he wasn't a party, he was invited to a talk, a discussion.
Again, I wrote a whole book on theories and connecting the dots, and I'm not going to pretend to be so deep into this story to be able to connect them all. But I hate to say this again, but if what we think is true, or what we've been hearing more and more is true, then he had to have known that it was about to be something, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, you got to wonder. I mean, we've always speculated on a lot of things since the beginning, things that we don't talk about. Was there a sexual aspect to this? I mean, was he meeting a girl there? I mean, you just don't know,
right.
you know?
And allegedly, Kevin, they were all banging each other. The McCabe's and the Alberts, they're all swingers. And I can tell you one thing too. If I can tell you one thing from the inside, right? 2 years on the sheriff's department and in another spot now. I also worked as my brief foray in Florida. I was also in law enforcement. That's like a very common thing I noticed. Everybody's fucking each other, man. Everybody's fucking each other. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and you know, and you know, I'm married. I don't involve myself in anything like that, but I would hear it, and you can't help but hear it, and you can't help but hear it. You know what I mean? And that was the one element of this story that did not surprise me one bit, is that they were all fucking each other. So if they're all fucking each other, that's even more reason for like people like Jen McCabe, who was allegedly in contact with John, was the one who pretty much, you know, quote unquote, lured him there. You know, and for her to want to cover down for her boyfriend and her fuck buddy and her other fuck buddy and whoever else she's fucking in there, you know. So I don't know.
So here's a question on that. So let's assume that John is invited back to the house because they want to work something. They want to work out a problem that Sean's going to talk about tomorrow.
Right.
All right. But when he's in the car with Karen, isn't he going to say something about that? Even if it's not specific, let's say, you know, we got a little issue with these guys. I got to go work it out. But she hasn't indicated that. To my knowledge, she has not. Wouldn't
Karen know that, as Sean, the commenter, so eloquently points out? Wouldn't she have known if what we think? Again, I hate to keep alluding to this, but if the new information ends up being true, wouldn't John have talked to Karen about that and said, "Hey, I got an issue with this guy for this reason and this reason"? That's something that you would talk about, like in bed at night. And wouldn't she go, "Hey, I'm not gonna leave my boyfriend off with these fucking people I know he has problems with. Let me at least make sure that he's okay. You know, I'm here. I know I'm 5 foot, 100 pounds, but you know, I can at least be a great witness." So I don't really get that. That's going to have to be explained, you know, at a later date. So.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really surprise me. You get to, you know, you've both been drinking. Your boyfriend makes you take him to a party. You argue about going into it probably the whole way there. She doesn't want to go in, and then they probably sat in the car and argued for several minutes. I'd be my guess, you know, while he's finishing his drink that he took from the bar, and then he finally gets out and he says, "All right, look, I'm going to go poke my head in the door to see if I'm welcome there, and if I don't come out." And within a couple minutes, just take off, and I'll figure out my way home. I mean, I don't really find that that's unusual. You know what I'm saying? On either Karen's part or John's part. Myself, you know, people been out drinking, and you know, he only lived 3 miles from there. He probably knew he could take an Uber or grab a ride from somebody. And if worse comes to worse, he could walk home without his jacket in the snow.
But the thing is, like, I'm just thinking out loud. Like Snatch just said something in the comments that I find interesting that I didn't know. So these guys were all together at the DC Officer Memorial that day. So they had just flown back to Boston that afternoon.
Yeah.
You see, I didn't know that. That's a well-known, you know, I didn't know that. And
so it was a long day of traveling and
so they had a long day of fucking Bloody Marys on a plane.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so, you know, these guys were probably, you know, I don't know. It's just like one of those stories, you know, the more dust you blow up, the more, you know, the blinder you get, you know, and unfortunately I have way too much experience with those, but it's just, if those guys were at the law enforcement memorial all day and then just flew in, then ended up at Waterfall, and then he's just so that was the first time he saw, in that surveillance tape, that was when Karen was walking in. So that's probably the first time he saw Karen in a couple of days then. No wonder why they had that kind of embrace, you know, because it was an embrace of like, "Hey, I haven't seen you for a while, babe. It's so great to see you," you know? That makes sense to me now. Did they fly or did they drive though? I wonder.
I don't actually know, but I know that like the Albert and Higgins where were they coming from? They came from somewhere, a long day of drinking too. I don't know if they came from a football game or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they had been out drinking all day too, and probably longer than John and Karen. So,
Oh, okay.
I
So
don't know.
H bag said they drove, so I'll
Yeah,
trust H bag. And Sean Curran, I see your comment. You found articles on McDonough of him being arrested for DUI and him making 38 seconds of video disappear from an interrogation of the stories of corruption. Sean, I'd love to hear more about that. If McDonough was, I mean, let's be real. If McDonough was arrested for DUI, does that really change anything for me? And how much he knows about this story and how the great sources he may have? No, that changes nothing for me. But making 30 seconds of an interrogation tape go away, if there's any credence to that, I'd love to know more. Thank you. Sorry.
so wait a minute. We're gonna. So people are actually digging into Sean's background to try to find.
Of course.
Is that what's
Of
going on
course.
now? So I
Yeah.
mean, what does that have to do with anything? I mean,
What
but
does it
it's
have
just
to do with anything? But
what's more interesting to me though is that this is what the case is now. You got people that are on. He's not trying to find out if Sean's credible. I'm going to guess
right.
that Sean Curran is already on one side of this, probably
Yeah.
connected to one of the families, sees there's something going on here. And so there they are. They've got the attack hounds out, and they're gonna dig into. I'm sure they're gonna do it on me now too, and you. And even though I'm kind of a little bit more on the fence, but you're gonna dig into everybody's past now and blow something up. And I guess you have to be willing to take it because that's how these people play. That's how they do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at Sean for doing any good research. I'm not mad at you at all, buddy. I'd love to know more. And again, I'm dug into one side, but of course, I like to see everything from all angles. And if something new pops off tomorrow that totally destroys my theory, then I'll sit here and apologize and say I'm a fucking idiot. You should never listen to me. But I don't think that's gonna happen. So
Sean McDonough is not someone that is connected to Karen Reed. So
right.
He obviously is someone that believes that she's innocent based on what he's looked at and what he's hearing and stuff like that. He may be wrong, but he's not someone that's trying to, that somebody has put onto this case for some reason, some agenda reason or something like that. You know what I'm saying? He's just a guy that's an honest cop, and that's his interpretation of what's going on. So there's no reason to attack him. There's no, you want to attack me? I mean, it's stupid. What's the point? I'm not on anybody's side either. You're not on anybody's side. We have our own opinions on what the truth is. Right. And if you don't like our opinions, argue against the opinion. If you don't like the evidence that we point to, argue against that evidence.
That's unfortunately the way this world is now. If you don't like what they say, find out, 20 years ago, he got arrested for DUI. And and instead of winning the argument, you assassinate the person making that argument, their character, and it's despicable. It's really not what men do, Sean. Just so you know, it's not what men do. Even though I appreciate you commenting and I appreciate it if you dug stuff up. That's good. That's what we should vet everybody. But that's not what men do.
The thing is I don't know if Sean McDonough is watching, but I mean, he knows that these attacks are going to come. And but when I see somebody show up on this small channel here like this and has been digging into his past and finding out about DUIs, you know what that tells me? Sean McDonough is over the target.
Right.
He's got to be
way over the target. Yeah.
And they're worried. People are worried. Now they're like, oh, let's go dig something up on him. Maybe maybe he stole some kid's lunchbox money in the 7th grade. Hey,
Sean, I hate to interrupt you, but Sean, I see your latest comment. Prosecution has a ton of evidence that we don't know about. Okay, murder cases take 5 years to be tried. Michael Chestnut, and this case is still in its infancy. So, what about the Chestnut case that has come out that we didn't know on the first night? You would reference that as if it's relevant to this case? I'm curious. And you can answer me back in the comments or email me or whatever. I mean, what did we not think about the Michael Chestnut murder when he was murdered by Emmanuel Lopes at the end of his shift in Weymouth years ago, when he was hit by a rock in the back of the head, then they took his service weapon and shot him execution style, including putting bullets through his face. What didn't we know? That's all I want to know, because how is the Chestnut case in any way relevant to this incredible convoluted case that we have here? Sorry, go
And I
on.
don't, to my knowledge, no reasonable doubt was ever created in the Chestnut
No,
case, right? So it was just one juror that just wouldn't give a reason, and
right.
she, we may never
What
know
you
her reason.
what you
But
had was one woke, new age, indoctrinated juror with blue hair and a septum piercing who couldn't accept the fact, who can't, who is so bought into this victimhood narrative that she could never vote guilty for a man who took away an officer's life, away, stole him from his children and his wife, an empty seat at the dinner table, no more Christmases, no more birthdays, no more anniversaries, nothing. I just want you to think about that for a second and think about how long eternity is, because that'll be the next time they see their father. And because you've been so poisoned by this media and useless, worthless politicians and your teachers and everybody in your life who's a complete fucking moron, and you couldn't convict this guy, that he so clearly did this, that it's not even a question from his defense team. His defense team just wants to put him in Bridgewater and keep him out of, Gen Pop for the rest of his life, where he'll almost certainly be killed or, made, to be somebody's sex slave or something like that. So
that's why sometimes cases go to trial, even though your client doesn't have a chance in hell, because it only takes one juror that might be a little nutty, and
right.
it has and in cases where they know there's a, let's call it a political component. I don't want to use any other terms, but you know what I'm saying, where it's something that affects somebody's ideology, that the baggage that they bring with them to the trial. Right. And if you can look at that and say, this is a guy that might trigger that, there's a good chance to be one juror. It's called jury nullification, right? So,
right.
Right. Yeah.
And just so you know, Emmanuel Lopes is going to be found guilty, whether it's next week, next month, 10 years from now. He's never going to see the light of day again. He's going to die in prison. So, all this really did was just compound and elongate the absolute anguish of the Chestnut family. So I hope they're proud of that for whatever that gives them.
I will say the difference between this and the Chestnut case right now is that the Chestnut case, it has had a trial. So we've seen the hands that both the prosecution and the defense, they're going to play. We haven't seen that yet. So Sean is right about that, Sean Curran, that we don't know
he is absolutely right about that.
Until we see the trial, we don't know. We know they had to turn over all their evidence to the defense, and the defense chooses what they want to make public. Other than that, we don't really know. So, and I also want to say, I don't know if Caitlin is still here. I want to say thank you to Caitlin, because Caitlin really challenged me on the black box thing last week. And like anybody who challenges me on anything that I report, I'm not going to say, oh, no, I'm like, oh, you think I'm wrong on this? Okay, well, let's get to the bottom of it, So I went and dug into it. I dug into it for days. I contacted people. There aren't that many that testify in these cases on black box data, and none of them got back to me. So I really wanted to get someone on the channel and talk about that. But it turned out that I was wrong on that. The black box data does not have a timestamp. It's certainly not as simple. It doesn't seem to anyway. And it certainly, as of 2013, they didn't. And I couldn't find any reports of an example that show that data. They may be able to you may be able to interpret that a time from that. But the question is that interpretation going to be accurate? So obviously, the defense is going to say, well, they're looking at an accident with her going in reverse, but that's her in the driveway. So right. But that's what the trial is for. But it's definitely not as simple as just printing out the black box and you get a time. I find it baffling that they don't have a timestamp data on these black boxes.
Baffling.
But it may be that they don't want them because they're not really there to try to convict the owners. It's supposed to be there for vehicle safety information they're trying to gather. So, and if you're maybe you wouldn't want to buy a vehicle if you knew the vehicle might be out to get you with a black box, even if you're a relatively safe driver,
Well, you know what does have a timestamp? An iPhone. And at 2:27 a.m., if you make a Google search of how long to die in cold, we really don't have a discussion here. And that's been proven, as far as I can see, by an expert in digital forensics. For right now, that's what I know to be true. And there's no way to dispute that.
Well, I'm not going to relive it, but it just, as you know, I don't agree with that. I believe that this to me is, like I said earlier, if there's a house fire and one side says it's arson and the other side says it's an accident, I'm I know nothing about house fires, so I'm just going to wait for the trial and look at the experts of both sides and make a decision from that. Just as a jury would do. In this case here, you have one expert from one side that is saying that she made that search, and Turtle's going to quibble over calling experts, but there's someone who was at least trained for that, like you were for the state police. And I don't, they went and hired another expert. I'm not sure what she said because we have to go by what Larry was saying. We don't have an official report. There are some reports.
Who was the expert that was hired for the state police? Who was that? What's his name?
Was her name Hyde or something? It was a woman, I think, named Hyde.
I thought you were talking about Guarino.
No. Guarino is the state police. Right. Again, we didn't quibble over expert, but he's the person the state police use for that. And there's no question that every search is there forever.
Forever.
The question is there. No one's questioning that. We're questioning is whether that search was made at 227. That's the only question. And I don't know the answer. I'm not a data expert, and I believe you that you were trained in that, but you don't have that analysis in front. You don't have that data in front of you for you to analyze.
Sean, so, if you're an auto mechanic, and the fucking engine is devoid of oil and it blows up, the engine's junk. There's some things that are just basic facts that you can't get away from. They don't change. And that's a terrible analogy. But relate this to anything you did in your life. When you owned the bar, there were certain bedrocks of owning a bar that were universal truths. I'm telling you right now that is a universal truth of data collection and storage in these devices. It's as fucking clear as the sky is blue.
Where are the other experts stepping forward to say this about this case? Just people out there in the true crime world. I'm not seeing.
Where's anybody? Where's anybody speaking out about this story other than a guy in Worcester who has his own blog? You know what I mean?
Why is the prosecution going to float something that you're saying is so indispensable and undeniable? That I don't. So to me, just as a layperson, I don't know. I don't. All I can do is look at what is there, and you have two experts competing against each other. Obviously, there's no way. No one's suggesting that anything was destroyed. It's a matter of interpreting what time it was. And I don't, there was something supposedly about if a search is opened, and I guess they were saying it was open for the basketball league or something like that. And then later on, I don't know anything about that stuff and how it works. So I'm not seeing any experts come forward on TV. Like if this was as cut and dry.
So you need a TV expert to say it. Okay. All right. We'll get you a TV expert. We'll get you one. We'll get a TV expert for you. Okay.
Give me a chance, Dave. All right.
Yep.
We can all agree on this, right? That if she searched at 2:27 a.m., how long to die in the cold? I think everybody in the world would agree, even that lone juror in the Chesney case would agree that there's a conspiracy here, right?
I mean, that would really push things over the edge. Yeah. For sure.
I mean, if Jen McCabe is searching how long to die in the cold, when 2 hours, 3 hours before they even know that this guy is missing, that's a slam dunk. That proves that there was a conspiracy in that house. Okay. So that would be the crime of the century already right there. If that story is true, you're already on the way to the crime of the century. So why isn't there one expert going on one news station or one true crime channel saying, oh my God, there's no way there could be any doubt on this. So this is the crime of the century. That's all I ask you. I mean,
okay. Kevin,
where are they?
I don't know.
But don't you think they'd be there? Don't you think they'd be there if this is a common knowledge thing? You're on the stand, Dave.
There's very few people who in that space who it's just not a very common expertise. I'm not even an expert. I've never practiced one day. I got the stupid piece of paper and then I brain dumped and I did just enough to graduate.
Don't say that on the stand. Don't say that on the stand. You won't help.
Right. All I know is this. There's no such thing as your search history archived and getting the times jumbled and it was really at this time and it wasn't. It's a very straightforward thing. I don't know why you won't accept that.
Because I'm saying, I just told you why. If it's a straightforward thing, and we all admit that if that search happened, that proves that this is the great conspiracy of our time. But one of them, it's definitely the greatest. It's the greatest true crime story since Murdaugh, at least, and certainly much bigger than that. There's no question that that's the case. So if this is a straightforward thing, why isn't everybody on why isn't Netflix running in and saying, let's get this film now? I mean, why aren't there people running around saying, oh my God, this is definitely a conspiracy? They're not. So to me, there must be still some question out there about about this actual data evidence.
Who needs to say it for you to? If Jake Tapper says it, will you then believe it on CNN?
Oh, come on! Don't be a smart ass. Come on,
right.
you know. I want to hear. I'm making a case to you that where are they? It's not that where are these people that should be out there saying? You're saying it's a slam dunk, it's obvious, and it's beyond any question.
Beyond a slam dunk. It's beyond.
But where are those people saying that?
They're going to testify. They're going to testify in her defense. I believe his name is Richard Green, and he is like the creme de la creme.
All right, but the defense's job is to find people that will say what's something that supports.
I'm not sure why Richard Green is not doing an interview on CNN tonight. That's a great point. He should be, but he's not paid to do that. He's paid to analyze the phone. And at 2:27 a.m., she Googled how long to die in cold, because either there was a dead guy out on the front and they wanted to see how long, or they wanted to dump the body and they wanted to make sure that the medical examiner didn't measure the body temperature and say, no, that guy was there for really 6 hours instead of 2 hours. And then that throws their whole theory and all their bullshit statements that they should have taken at the scene all get called into question. And now they're known liars and we have a major issue. I don't know where that...
I've seen Court TV. You've seen Court TV and some of the other true crime channels have jumped on this case a couple months ago, and because they're loving it, because they're licking their chops. They're sitting there saying, if this is a conspiracy, this is going to drive our ratings for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know why they haven't picked up on it, but they don't. I mean, are you really asking me right now why the mainstream media doesn't cover that like that? I mean, the New York Times denied the Holocaust. I mean, why do you? I mean, I can't believe right now.
Let's not go there. Let's go. Tom, I want to just address.
Are you saying what I'm saying is these people are tobacco executives. They're liars. They're selling. I mean, they're the you can't get a whisper on the story in South Boston. You can't get a. I mean, why are they not bringing these people? You're really basing your thoughts right now on why there isn't somebody out there on Court TV singing this to the moon.
I'm basing the fact that you have one expert on one side and you have one or two on the other side, and that's it. And I don't have anybody else that's talking about it that is not. If you're talking now, I could see why Channel 5 isn't going to want to bring on an expert, okay? Because they're clearly on one side of the case.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Hold on a second. But Court TV and similar things like that, they're living for this case, okay? And they need this case to be a conspiracy. They want it to be a conspiracy, just like I do, just like Turtle Boy does. It benefits channels like us to have a nice, juicy case to get it. Look, we got a growing audience here. It's great. We're talking about this juicy conspiracy. So if Court TV has access to go out and find just an ordinary run-of-the-mill data expert to say, yeah, but they haven't done it. So this is not leaning on authority. This is just, where is that? And Tom, you're saying that I'm looking for an appeal to authority where Dave is an authority. Dave just said he took a semester on this and hasn't done any work on it.
No. 4 years. 4 years. Not 4 years.
No, but I mean, it's not. You've never done a case. So no. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying this is all kind of crazy to me.
Many mock cases, and I was able to graduate with. I got like a 3.2. Come on, man, give me some credit. I had to go to community college first.
You kind of made it. No, I know you're very smart. I'm just saying you made it smart. You made it sound like you haven't really done anything. Like you studied that and then didn't do anything in the field. So I don't know where you just challenged your own expertise about 5 minutes ago. And I remember I was kidding. I said, don't say that in the court. Somebody hires you to be an expert. So I'm just saying, where you're saying it's straightforward. I don't know that it's straightforward, and I'm not hearing any other data expert going on there saying it's straightforward. So that's it. And I know people get mad at me.
Other than Richard Green, who's the world's authority on it.
How do you know? I don't know that he's the world's authority. You've said that. I don't know that. I just know he works the data.
Well, I mean, instead of Googling,
I didn't see that. I did Google it, and I didn't see world's authority anywhere. I saw that he works for.
He works at the creme de la creme data company in this area. He's pretty well renowned in the circles as one of the best and most innovative data guys around. I mean, he's very well known. So I mean, I don't know who the best spear fisherman either is, Kevin. But if I went into the spear fishing community, I bet you those guys would really know who the best one was. And I go, oh fuck, I don't know who he is. Jake Tapper doesn't talk about him, so I don't know. You know what I mean? It doesn't. So I
know in every case. This is what goes on in a trial. the defense is going to find experts in a field to testify, engineers, body language experts, whatever. They find them. They know how to. I've been in trials. I know what goes on, and that's what they do.
Cosmo has a great comment. Cosmo has the best comment of the night. Okay. What does the prosecution have to dispute Richard Green? I'm going to tell you who they have. They have a state trooper named Guarino who covered up another case in Canton of a murdered girl named Sandra Borchmore. When they tried to get her cell phone data, he said, searches are gone. There's nothing we can do about it. He's already proven himself to be a liar, and he knows nothing about data collection. And he's a complete and utter farce. He should have been fired years ago. He covered up a murder of a young girl, 20-year-old girl, and he's trying to do it again. That's who they have to dispute it. Trooper Guarino.
No, Turtleboy made a great point of bringing that stuff up. I don't, and I don't question it. And I thought it was interesting where Turtleboy was talking about it. So I have no problem with questioning Guarino, but I'm just saying, I'm not saying Guarino's good. I'm not saying that Rich Green is wrong. I'm saying I don't know. And so when you tell me if it's straightforward and obvious, to who? I mean, just the people that are. Listen, it's straightforward. I'm gonna play this. This is gonna piss people off. It's straightforward and obvious to people that already have bought into a narrative, and that's it. And they're not gonna question anything because that's just human nature. People don't question things, and that's just the way it is. I've seen it in every case. I've seen it in life. It's just like if you're inclined to believe that Hunter Biden is a good guy and that was a Russian plot, you're going to believe it. It doesn't matter what the evidence is. People buy into the narrative they want to buy on. And I'm trying not to do that. I want to look at experts. I want to wait for the testimony. But I will be convinced, yes. And I'm sorry if that bothers people, but if there are some independent experts that aren't connected to this case that go on Court TV or CNN or whatever at Fox News, and they say, boy, that will make an impression on me. And I haven't seen it. So so at this point I have nothing. So
Kevin, where you have DNA. DNA has put a lot of people away. It's exonerated a lot of people. Your phone has DNA. It's time stamped. It's your blood type. It cannot be. It can't be compromised. It is what it is, and that's the same with your search history. And it's just actually there's just no way around it.
If you're going to go with that, you don't want to go with that theory because I've studied DNA a lot. The guy who invented how to use DNA to identify people, he quickly became he now heads the Innocence Project, and he testifies in trials that DNA should not be used. And in fact, the only thing, hold on, no, this is the truth. He uses DNA only to get people's innocence. Because what he says is not that DNA is.
Oh, okay. So it works when it's exonerating them, but when it finds them guilty, it doesn't work. Okay.
And do you know? Yeah. Do you know what, Dave? Listen. Sometimes listen and learn. Listen. No, I mean I'm not blowing smoke. I mean I'm not an idiot here. Okay. The reason he says that is because the police that use these techniques are unreliable because they're in a rush to convict. So it's not that the DNA technique doesn't work. It's that it can't really be reliably trusted in the hands of prosecution. So that's his reason. So it's not like it's an airtight thing to say DNA. It's not. There is an element of analysis that goes on with it and expertise, and it's part of it. And so the guy that invented it is against using that to prosecute people. That's just a fact, and that's been around. He's headed that project for about 20 years. They've managed to free thousands of people that were proven innocent by that. So, anyways, but it was a fun battle. I actually have to get going.
It always is.
So we'll be sorry if we got heated, guys. It is what it is. I mean, I'm all for people being a believer in something, but I think it's important to keep an open mind in any situation. And I would do that for any of you guys too. If you guys were on trial for something, I'd keep an open mind.
And I would immediately convict you without question. So,
all right. Hey, what are you planning on doing tomorrow at the hearing?
I'm going to keep an open mind, and I'm gonna hang out with our people and try and talk to some Alberts and some McCabe's and try and connect with Turtle Boy and just have some fun, man. Get the vibe of the people on the ground. Very excited to be there live and in person, and I'll see you guys there. Look for me.
Well, you've always done a great job. I've always said your superpower when you go out on your investigations is that you get people to talk to you that normally don't talk to police or anybody else. So I'm sure we'll see that in action tomorrow.
Yes, sir. You'll see me, guys. Big smile. Come on over and say what's up to me. Maureen, I hope to see you. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
All right. Have a good night, guys. Thank you.
See you guys.